Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Tom Delaney. I'm the State Personnel Development Grant Director in the state of Minnesota. Our State Personnel Development Grant in this round is primarily focused on increasing graduation rates for American Indian students with disabilities. And as soon as I say that, I want to clarify what I mean by American Indian students with disabilities. One of the issues we have is that there is a federal way to count that where you can self-identify as Native. And if you identify in another category of race or ethnicity, you get categorized in an other category or under multiple. So here in the state of Minnesota, I just want to clarify that when I use the term American Indian student or staff or Native, we're talking about everyone who self-identifies, even if they also identify with another race or ethnicity category. SPDG has been one of the drivers for us in changing the way we talk about that. So what you just witnessed is one of those systemic changes we put into the APR, both for the SPDG and the state systemic improvement plan. So Jennifer forwarded me 8 minutes. I've probably eaten up about 1 or 2 as it is, but here's the short version, everyone. So as far as 4-H's and introductions, I am not a complicated person. I'm a simple school psychologist that got into alternative high school education and started one in a trailer with a broken toilet in a school district in eastern Minnesota. And interestingly, as you talk about lack of that capacity and structure, I picked up all of the school district's Native students pretty quickly there. So there was a need, and we did fix that toilet and got things off the ground. On the side, I also have a background, like many educators, you find another way to pay the bills, either roofing or painting or something. So I was a performing musician, still am once in a while. And early on, I don't know how it happened. I just started playing with a lot of Native music artists. And so I started spending more and more time in Native communities. And I got involved with Native language revitalization in Minnesota here, which is the Dakota and Ojibwe languages primarily. And so when it came to the State Personnel Development Grant, and even back when we had to identify a SIMR, if you remember those days, I was pretty enthusiastic to talk about graduation rate gaps for Native students and Native students with disabilities. And Minnesota, we could have ignored it. We have a huge gap. I think by some accounts, the largest gap in the nation. But I'm pretty proud of the fact that we took a bold move, and the SPDG is part of that, to address that. My heroes, I just got back from Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College, and it is an amazing center of learning, both about the world and about self. I'm going to leave it at that, but we have an amazing tribal college in our state. Heartbreak, I also write a lot of legislative proposals. So every year, man, I got plenty of heartbreak. So, I mean, put on the Merle Haggard and the old George Jones, because that's the legislative session for me. So, but I always come back. My hope is, and you guys are part of it, I'd love to see our national level state personnel development grant projects have the capacity, probably already do, but I want people to feel supported in taking a look at that disaggregation of your large molar results for American Indian students. There's many states, Minnesota's one of them, where we have a large number of Native students. And even if you're not in a state that thinks of that right away, it'd be my hope that we all feel supported, disaggregate what we see, all the positives and everything, and see, is it really working for Native kids too, and feel supported in owning when it's not, and asking ourselves the questions why. One of the things that, keeping track of time here, one of the things that we recently explored in our state personnel development grant is we used a very conventional method of getting grant opportunities out to school districts serving Native communities, and probably all state agencies may be roughly the same. There are set channels of communication that use email, or there's a superintendent's list, special ed director's list. You may end up sending emails to names that you know, saying, hey, you need to check this out. But we really had a repetitive pattern of a very low response rate from school systems serving Native communities in Minnesota. Finally, we said, we got to do something about this and figure out what's up. So we got together 3 subject matter experts involved with our state personnel development grant. And that's Chris Akins from Pacer Center and the Native Parents piece they have at Pacer Center. Dan Torres, who works on PBIS Native Voices and a project we have in Minnesota called Dream Catchers, and Govinda Boudreau, who works at Fond du Lac Tribal College. What we did is we just simply asked them, what's up? Why is the response rate so low? What I'm going to do next is share a screen with you to show you, if I have the ability to.
Yeah, well, Tom's working on that. So just for people who are just coming in,
Yep.
hopefully you can see that Kelsey put these tips into your chat so you can save them and have access to them later. By the way, I think this generalizes to reaching any district, really. You can talk about urban districts. You can talk about different kinds of districts. I think this is a generalizable list of things to think about when you're trying to reach different people. And Thomas shared in the past the map of who they're working with and how they're trying to spread their reach. And so this is going to help him, hopefully. Sorry, I just wanted to give that background, Tom.
No, that's great. Yeah, I always need a little bit of help here. I'm an introvert struggling to be extroverted. So what we have here is I'll just share with you. And you know, when you write something for yourself and for your staff and it's not a contract or anything, I write things very plainly. So what I developed is a tip sheet for myself and the SPDG team and our partners to improve response rates. And that's what we're sharing with you today. Real briefly, like I said, it's in plain speak. Number one, ensure the paperwork is as simple and straightforward as possible. And my comment to myself is don't hold an essay contest, okay? You're going to see other tips in here emphasizing personal contact communication, especially in connecting with Native communities. You've got to get face-to-face time. They have to see you, and you have to boldly take on that what can be a tough relationship between state education agencies and Native communities. Just show up, be open, humble, and authentic, and do the best you can. As far as data, you know, I came to SIG Network, I think it was last year or so, talk about how this data for Native kids just gets lost because we focus so much on large molar, large ends in results and analysis. But you got to use data to help systems see Native kids. There's plenty in here about clarity, clarity, clarity. The other part is being inviting at every turn in a very authentic way and go the extra mile. We're one of the states where the capital is located on the border of the state in the east, and all of our school systems serving Native communities are up in North Central, South Central, and I've never gotten in trouble for it yet, but I'm the first one to admit we fish off the dock a lot, man. We work with Minneapolis and St. Paul and the Crescent suburbs, and no problem. But as far as our relationships with far-flung, I mean, we have, Boys Fort and stuff. We have Native communities in the far northwestern corner of the state where they haven't seen a state employee or a state car possibly for years. They don't even know what we look like. They're curious, but that's the status of the relationship. So, I'll share this with you, and it may be helpful. I invite you to take a look at it. I think overarching, if I had one comment sort of to say about the whole thing, is really ponder the incongruities between our routine state agency systems or even our projects, our SPDG projects, and the way we routinely do things, and the possible mismatch with how people in small capacity, very culturally, high cultural context communities function, and the gap between those and what we can do to cross those gaps in ways that are authentic, engaging, and, for the logical positivists and results-based accountability people, do produce results. We can do it. So I thank you for your time today. I'm here if you ever want to just kick around ideas. If you're a state that is interested in focusing in a focused way, okay, on how your project is or is not reaching Native students, you can reach out to me. Jennifer would probably like to hear from you. There's a few of us states that get together and talk about it. Let us know if that's something you'd like to focus on with your project. A little plug there. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Tom. All right, good, Rhode Island. Good. You're prompting action already. So, we haven't done this so much before, where we right away hear from what a state is up to or a challenge that they've had. I know we heard before from Idaho that they weren't getting the kinds of responses they wanted. We've heard from other people. So we thought that tip sheet would be helpful, and the experience, and then thinking about the data, I think is great. So that was Tom sharing. And then we want to say congratulations to our new 2022 grantees. You see the list here: Alabama, California, Georgia, Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, Nebraska, New Mexico, Ohio, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Vermont. Congratulations. We're very happy for you. If you were at the conference last year, the SPDIG national meeting, you wrote a note to your future self. It should be arriving in your inbox imminently. So please be on the lookout for it. Kelsey is going to put a Jamboard link into the chat. Once you get the note to your future self, please add what your goal was to the Jamboard if you feel comfortable doing so. And you're also going to have a chance to talk about the progress you've made toward that goal. All right, so what have we been up to? We're continuing our interviews with projects. We have a virtual national meeting February 8th and 9th. We're going to be reading Made to Stick and talking about how the work that you do can stick to people, right? They get them interested, get them going, get them implemented, get them implementing and sustaining. We're continuing with working on our different areas, content areas for our working groups. Shorthand support is available through Kelsey. We can connect you with a mentor if you don't already have one. Our September newsletter went out. Hopefully you had a chance to look at it, and Kelsey is going to put, it's not clicking. Kelsey is going to go ahead and put a link because we want to get your feedback. We've been doing this for a little while now. And so we want to know if you're using the information, how you like it, and what we can change. All right, from there, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, who is Lou, and I think you might have Todd with you as well from, oops, sorry, messing you all up, from the New Jersey SPDIG, is going to have a conversation with us about what he's learned so far. He also wants to share his website because there was a lot of interest in that in the SPDIG national meeting last year. He's going to talk about sustainability with us today. And then following that, Karen Erickson and Claire Greer are here from UNC Chapel Hill, and they're going to talk about the Tar Heel Reader, which is something that you can freely use with your students. All right, and I'm going to stop sharing. So welcome, Lou. And I believe Todd might be there as well.
Yep. So good afternoon. How are you? I'm going to actually, so we'll open up with the presentation. I also, though, for Tom's wonderful opening, I'm thinking about, all right, what 4-H's I have going on. And so originally when I received the email from Jennifer, I was thinking about, okay, who's my hero? Batman, of course. But no, now I'm going to think a little bit more about this. And it actually comes back to a presentation I did for the SPDIG related to connecting with families. And that was actually off of one of these presentations where I was introduced to Kim Breen and the work that she does around supporting family engagement. So my heroes, though, I'm gonna cheat a little bit, are my parents. I'm a first generation American. My family's all from Brazil. And in that presentation that was inspired by Kim's piece here was, we talked about the importance of connecting with families and the sensitivity that we have to have when we're presenting data and engaging in the systems change work and talking to families about that. Because while things can be done with great spirits in mind, the message that we're sending to our family members may not be the message we intended for them to receive. So in my case, in kindergarten, my home was a Portuguese-speaking home, and I was bilingual at that point. And what happened in kindergarten was that I was referred for services, and my family saw that as an issue, and that says something's wrong with my kid. They're trying to put him in speech class, and they became alarmed about that. And what the consequences of that was, in the beginning of the school year, there was this form that we would fill out in our classroom, and we'd fill it out with the teacher, and the teacher would ask, do you speak another language at home other than English? And I was then coached to lie about that every time, because my parents had a fear of what it meant for me to be recommended for services. So I have a longer presentation that I definitely can hash out about what the impact of that and consequences for like educational experiences and how that colored. But ultimately, my parents are my heroes because they set me on a stage to really advocate for folks like me, and to support our schools and having those communications and being really thoughtful about the authority that we carry in our words in position as state officials, as Tom was describing, and also as educators, right? We're entrusted with our kids. So that'll start off with my heroes.
Mhm.
Right in terms of heartbreak, I did think deeply about that one before coming on to today's session, and it brought me back to May 25th. So this is work that I do also outside of our SPDIG, but May 25th was the day after the Uvalde incident, and we came into work, and I prepared a message for my team, and in delivering that message, it was the importance of bringing our authentic selves to work and recognizing each other not as just employees on this team doing fostering work for school climate, NJTSSER, and that, but no, as mothers, fathers, family members, and seeing my son going into kindergarten, really that incident struck differently for me this year than other incidents have. So that continues to drive some of the work that we get to be part of in my office. In terms of hope, yes, this is certainly related, is the Safer Communities, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act has definitely motivated a lot of efforts on our end, and I'm hoping that we drafted now a competitive application for those grants that were just announced by USAID. I'm sure as many of you do, I wear multiple hats, and so that's part of some of the focus that we have in our office now too. And then I'm missing my last H.
And I think you got them, your history. So you did your history, your hero, your heartbreak, and your hope.
Yep. So
Got it.
that'll color some of the presentation today as to who I am as a person. But what I want to do is also now give you a brief overview of what is our New Jersey SPDIG work about, and then talk about sustainability and hit on some of those pieces a little later. So I'm actually going to share my screen, and give me 1 second.
Got many seconds.
Okay. And
Perfect. We can see it.
all right, and beginning. Here we go. All righty. Okay, so again, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for offering your time and attention to learn a little bit more about our project. So just formally introduce myself. My name is Lou Pereira, and I serve as the project director for the New Jersey Tier System of Supports for Early Reading Project, which is, of course, supported by the State Personnel Development Grant. And I'm joined today by my partner and co-director, Dr. Todd Glover from Rutgers University, to offer an overview of our project and to share some of our story describing our efforts to advance the work. And I'm sure, as I said a little bit earlier, many of you are wearing multiple hats today. And our hope is that today we share some learning that has occurred over our time working originally on a grant, which we were awarded back in 2016, and how we've been able to make incremental but significant progress in creating capacity and scaling our project. Okay, so why is it called NJTSS? So NJTSS is New Jersey's framework for MTSS, and I won't dive too deeply into it, but you see the outer red triangle on our framework. Those are the components that make New Jersey's framework unique. So it builds on current intervention referral services regulations that we have in New Jersey, and calls for coordination of all supports and interventions across schools and districts. And the activities facilitated through the SPDIG award apply the NJTSS framework to identifying and addressing kindergarten to third grade student needs in early literacy acquisition or early reading. And as a consequence of the work, we essentially are supporting schools in implementing evidence-based reading instruction through a tiered model. So what I have here is our 3 levels of capacity building, and they were designed with sustainability and scalability in mind. And this is unique to the award that we received in 2021. Each of the levels memorializes the process and supports for any interested and committed district to own their progress in implementing the model. So the key is they own their progress, and we wanted to provide them the tools that they can do that with. And we'll touch a bit more on this later, but this approach is driven by what we've learned during our first 6 years of this work, which began in 2016. I believe it's important to frame the rest of this presentation by acknowledging that during our first SPDIG, we found that we could improve our assistance to districts by creating a means in which they could truly own their progress in implementing the model and providing the tools and materials for them to sustain the work. They began with our team support. And so the support provided through our SPDIG project is described in 3 levels. The first level support, or universal support, is provided through professional development opportunities and resources available to all districts and schools statewide through an online platform with asynchronous training modules and a large collection of tools to support school leaders and implementation personnel. Our second level of support is provided through targeted training and technical assistance via synchronous training opportunities on identified areas of high need, which include training focused on assessment literacy, analyzing and adjusting core instruction, and alignment of resources and building awareness of the science of early reading. Our final and most intensive support includes ongoing coaching for a cohort of districts accompanied by an online coaching facilitation system used to most seamlessly scaffold data-driven, research-based instruction and early reading intervention. So over the next slides, I'm going to provide you with an overview of the process and tools available to schools and districts statewide that are interested in implementing this model. Okay, so the overview of NJTSS Early Reading Framework is designed to provide an at-a-glance snapshot of the key foundational knowledge and essential components needed to effectively implement an NJTSS approach focused on improving students' early reading proficiency. To inform decisions, foundational knowledge is required in 3 areas: team-based early prevention model, assessment and data-based decision-making, and research-based priority early reading skills. This foundational knowledge is an important prerequisite to effectively implement practices, procedures for universal screening, diagnostics, and progress monitoring, as well as implementing and monitoring instructional supports across all tiers of instruction. The full integration of all components results in a continuous cycle of data-informed instructional decision-making. An essential first step is to collect data on the early reading proficiency of all kindergarten through 3rd grade students through the administration of universal screening. Universal screening data are used to determine the extent to which core reading instruction is enabling students to meet benchmark expectations, and to identify which students may benefit from additional intervention supports to close skill gaps. In Tier 1, ongoing curriculum embedded assessment data are collected and analyzed in order to inform differentiation and adjustment to core needs. Tier 1 implementation is also monitored to ensure instruction is being delivered with fidelity. For students who did not reach benchmark expectations on universal screening, early reading indicators, diagnostic skill inventories are administered to determine which specific skills to target for intervention. With this data, interventions are planned and implemented. Ongoing progress monitoring assessments are administered to determine student progress towards goals and effectiveness of the intervention. The implementation of Tiers 2 and 3 is also monitored to ensure instruction is being delivered with fidelity. As I mentioned earlier, we are empowering our schools to own the work. And so there are 3 primary early reading leadership team roles that we've identified and established for the NJTSS for early reading model: a systems change leader, an NJTSS facilitator, and content experts. It's the function of each of these roles that's more important than the titles themselves. Personnel that are essential to the effective action planning, capacity building, and integration of the frameworks, individuals may be well positioned to be assigned to different roles at different times, depending on the level of authority, capacity, and expertise. And we are so clear on the roles because we've recognized that through our time, these are the functions that have to be tended to as schools continue to implement. For example, an English language arts supervisor may serve as a systems change leader, an NJTSS ER facilitator, and or a content expert. Team building is dependent on district resources such as personnel and time, and we recognize that. NJTSS early reading is designed to be integrated in phases, which prioritize in order for introducing key aspects of NJTSS ER. Each phase outlines clearly defined stages of integration provided. For each essential component, the work at each phase is completed before moving on to the next. Once integrated, stages repeat as part of data-guided implementation. Each of the 5 stages provides an organized workflow, integrating each essential component in the NJTSS for early reading or ER framework. In stage 1, districts prepare, they preview the implementation steps and build knowledge. In stage 2, districts appraise existing school practices, select resources and tools, and establish district guidelines. In stage 3, districts install the essential component, they schedule implementation and prepare for implementation monitoring. In stage 4, districts implement the essential component as well as engage in database decision-making aligned to district guidelines and plans. And finally, in stage 5, districts evaluate effectiveness of the implementation and make refinements to each essential component as needed. The roadmap and the accompanying resources and supports provide districts with guidance in building a robust system to improve early reading achievement for all students. Through the NJTSS ER website, districts are able to easily access information about the NJTSS ER framework. The launch date of the website is tentatively right now, and though the website districts can access through the website, districts can access resource library and training opportunities, which include online learning resource. We're going to pause the presentation so my colleague, Dr. Todd Glover, can facilitate a demonstration of the website and its features. Before I do that, though, I do want to offer some time if anybody has any questions. No questions? Okay, then I could turn it over to Todd and he can go ahead and do a demonstration of the website.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lou. I assume you can hear me. I just really lost my controls. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. The website is really designed in a way that supports what Lou mentioned pertaining to sustaining practices over time and building the knowledge and capacity required to implement different components of the NJTSS system. So we were really cognizant in designing all of our resources, but also the website in a way that was mindful of kind of, trying to create really explicit protocols, resources, materials in very practical ways that could be used by our school stakeholders. And so it's designed that way. We did learn a lot, I think, during the first initial SPIDIG award that we received back in 2016 with regard to the importance of sustaining, to sustain practices over time that schools really did need to have the tools and resources and organizational structure in place where they took ownership of it. I think in the initial formative years of our work, as Lou will share with you here in a moment, we often served more as consultants that were an extension of some of the districts rather than arming them with the tools to kind of scaffold their own movement through the progression of the stages required to implement the framework. So we've been mindful of that in designing the website. So yeah, this is our website, and as Lou mentioned, it will be, we anticipate that it'll be launched officially next week. We're in the final knit stages now, making some improvements. The website itself we thought it'd be important to have a public-facing resource for all schools. We have it in New Jersey, although it's really accessible to anybody, to learn about the systemic approach to multi-tiered supports for early reading, the importance of foundational knowledge and building foundational knowledge among school stakeholders to implement this framework, the essential components of the framework itself, and then the aspects that Lou mentioned earlier, which is the multi-phased kind of staged integration of that work. So within our website, we have a place on here that houses planning and implementation resources. As Lou mentioned, our level 3 support districts get more of a white glove approach where we provide more individualized consultative coaching supports to them, but really any district or school stakeholders can come to access this information through our website. The planning and implementation resources here, we provide an orientation to how the resources are used together. Things like action plans, meeting protocols, and tools and materials that districts can use. We've integrated those kind of into a package. And so this outlines how those can be used. We have a user guide that outlines in more detail how they work together. But then within our framework is depicted as building foundational knowledge. And so we have some background information that users can access simply by clicking on the website to learn more about those areas which it's important to build foundational knowledge. And then we have action plans and protocols that districts and school leaders can use to implement NJTSS integration into their districts. And so these action plans help guide their actions. The protocols are what they use during regular meetings to organize those meetings, to engage in each of the steps of kind of the implementation process. So we have these for each of the kind of core components of the MTSS framework. So here's an example for universal screening where they can go in, they can access action plans. Those action plans then depict their progress through implementing protocols and materials that are tied to different stages. So as I'm interested in implementing universal screening, I want to engage in a prepare stage where I bring in stakeholders, we engage in some background knowledge building, we learn about our existing resources and future resources we may need. We then engage in establishing, installing, implementing, and evaluating those stages that Lou presented earlier. Those materials are all available through our website for each of the core components there. And then we also thought it would be important to have a resource library that's online and housed for our stakeholders. And so that's here. It's organized. You can filter by topic, the resource type. So we have everything here between online courses to instructional videos to research documents, practice guides. They can be filtered by the audience as well as particular grade levels to which they apply in the year. And then you're able to access this research directly out of our library here. So that's kind of how that piece is organized. So again, not to just do a show and tell of a website, but I think the purpose of sharing this with you today was more to get a sense of how we've really tried to scale these efforts beyond just individual consultation with districts to something that's publicly available that people can access. And we try to scaffold it in a way that they use these resources systematically to build systems change rather than just kind of cherry picking resources throughout the website. So I'll hand it back to Lou. That's kind of the brief show and tell of what we offer there.
I appreciate it, Todd. Thank you so much. Okay, give me 1 second to get back. All right, so on the website, there are a number of tools that over the next couple of slides, not too much longer, and then we're just really going to get into dialogue. But I'm just going to highlight some of the contents that are there. So the online learning courses that Todd was talking about, including on the website, support districts in building knowledge and capacity to implement the essential components. For each course, a certificate of completion is available to districts to document the hours for continuing education requirement. In addition, action plans, protocols, and materials are also available to facilitate the successful integration of each NJTSS for early reading essential component. Action plans for each component support district leadership teams in facilitating planning for each stage of the NJTSS for early reading framework. Action plans include a detailed description of what's needed at each stage, step-by-step key actions for integrating each stage, meeting protocols to facilitate each key action, and materials and tools aligned to the meeting deliverables. Meeting protocols identified at point of use in each action plan include step-by-step procedures for facilitating meetings, including the rationale or importance of each meeting, meeting objectives, prerequisites and materials needed to conduct each meeting, and step-by-step guidance for the completion of each key action. Guidance includes important resources such as component overviews, and online learning courses. Districts receiving individualized consultative supports that Todd was describing is our level 3 support, right? Benefit from guidance provided by consultants with extensive NJTSS for early reading implementation expertise. To help facilitate with the consultative process, districts will be expected to share completed action, or they are expected to share completed action plans and protocols. An example of a completed Tier 1 meeting protocol with notes is taken in the blue text shown over here. So that is what we're asking our project districts to submit to us as demonstration of how they're progressing in their implementation. And then completion of key actions is also noted in Tier 1 action plan. And we support that through ongoing webinars that occur throughout the year, and also through those check-ins where we see how are they progressing, how they faring with the project implementation. And again, we're continuing to bring them back to the website and the resources there to support them in owning their progress. So before I continue on, I'll stop sharing here and then I'll come back to it as it makes sense. Jennifer shared a couple of questions with me to talk through. And one of the main questions that we spoke about was sustainability. So go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. That's what I'm here for. So, and thank you for sharing the website. Like I was saying before, there had been a lot of interest. I know most of the states, most of the SPDIGs have websites that they use. I know it can be challenging being an SEA and putting together a website. So there was one question that came in that I want to get to before. Yeah, there you go. Before we get into the questions up, since we haven't started yet. And that was from Becky in Minnesota. And the question is, what are your plans on sharing this information with colleges and universities as they prepare educators entering the field?
So this is a really timely conversation. The educator prep programs are not, the regulations surrounding the educator prep programs are not administered by my office, but we work closely with that office. And there is actually a new endorsement that New Jersey is exploring on endorsement specific to early reading. And with that said, it gives us access to an association called NJ-ACTE, which is essentially all the deans of the educator prep programs. So as this endorsement continues to develop, what we imagine that the next question that we're going to receive is, okay, what supports are going to be available for all these educator prep programs to support our prospective educators in acquiring the skills to deliver this type of instruction. And that's where our project does come in, and we are able to link to that. And and we'll talk a little bit about this later, but that also comes with the alignment that's occurring at our department, where our commissioner has a vision for what early literacy education is going to look like in New Jersey by 2026. And so that's where it's directing alignment across divisions and across regulations, which is nice to see.
That'll be really interesting to see how that plays out, because most states, I mean, I'd be very interested for someone to raise their hand if they do not have this issue, but most states have an issue with getting, maybe they have one university they can work with to get, the different skills that you need for MTSS or reading, et cetera, into the pre-service curricula and syllabi, but not typically, multiple universities or getting the universities to work together and on and on and on. And Mary had her hand up.
No, I was clapping
Oh, sorry. I
about the
didn't.
commissioner. Yeah.
Yeah, that is really great. I know. I've been excited about what I've heard.
One thing I could add to that, Lou, is that and I just typed it in the chat, and you were reading out the question as I was trying to type an answer, and I didn't quite catch up. But is that we are trying to build a guide. It doesn't exist yet for how like our online modules and tools and all can be built into undergraduate and graduate coursework. I'm teaching a class in the spring where I'm integrating these into my course. It's a graduate level course in a master's program, and so I'm using this as kind of a pilot, but we intend to kind of create a guide for how that could be done with other educators and integrate that into their coursework as well. So we see it as important, particularly for pre-service education, to try to systematize some of this work before educators are out in the field. So
Yeah, and I will share that New Jersey is not immune to that issue where does this expertise lie in our educator prep program? We did a scan before going in this direction, and only 2 of our universities had coursework related to evidence-based reading instruction. And those were in the special education programs.
Yeah, absolutely. A question came up from a 2022 grant in their kickoff meeting, I believe. Maybe, I don't know. Anyways, one of the specifics. And they were asking what people are using to assess knowledge of the scholars and the prep programs, what you're using to assess. Like, so if you wanted to know, so Kim, you're on, this is perfect. So they were talking about the RTFI, the Reading Tiered Fidelity Inventory, right? And they're using that in the schools, but it's not appropriate seemingly to use it for the teachers being prepared to see what their knowledge level is related to MTSS and the things that you want them to know. So I guess, Todd, have you thought through what tool you'll use to determine the knowledge and skills that educators and other folks being prepared have?
So I have to admittedly was a little distracted by the new link somebody posted here that I was interested in. I'm sorry, my attention got divided. But I think shiny thing. Right. But I think I will say, like, within our, if I don't answer the question, please. But I think we're interested in with our online modules that we provide to educators to help build capacity for implementing kind of this MTSS framework. We build in assessments into those online modules that always starts with a pre-assessment and ends with a post-assessment. So we're able to get some indication of skill development, and they're not all just informational questions. Some of them are application activities they engage in to try to gauge their increase in knowledge and skills. Obviously, at the higher ed level, I'm integrating some of this work into my course, and obviously there are ways I'm trying to build as many practical hands-on activities to gauge their knowledge and skills beyond just, learning the facts. So I don't know, did I answer that question, or was
yeah, so just to paraphrase, you said that in your course, you're having the students go ahead and do the online modules and make use of the protocols, and that embedded in those modules are knowledge and skill assessments.
That's right.
As well as doing some more applied work that you have them doing in IRL kind of thing.
That's right. Yeah, and anybody that makes use of our online modules, regardless of whether in a graduate course or they're practitioners in the field, has those knowledge and skills assessments embedded within the courses. So we're able to look at that. And we're using that formatively too, is when we see that, they're getting this, but they're not getting this. Let's change the modules around, or let's provide ongoing TA or coaching around that. That seems something where we need extra support. Yeah.
Yep. And if everyone is thinking about the evidence-based professional development, the rubric, right? When you get data that people don't have the skills and the knowledge that you want them to have, then you feed that back into the training, or you feed it forward to the coaching. It changes something about what you're doing. And Kim is saying that Kim St. Martin, since she's one of the creators of the RTFI. It's not designed to be a teacher knowledge assessment. We have created one for the advanced tiers, though it's a separate online survey where teachers provide their answers. Use that data pre-post for our SIP Part B, which is scaling up database individualization for early literacy. And then there's the MTSS, my MTSS and Material for Elementary Secondary. Good. So there's lots of stuff going on. I won't keep doing that. But Lou, I am happy to get to ask you this question.
Sarah has a question before we jump.
Okay, sure.
I wanted to mention that Cedar Center has what they call innovation configurations. And so it's a nice way to break apart the pieces and look at how knowledge is built, how skills are built, and then how practice-based opportunities are added. And we've used them to look at IHE programs to see where some of the evidence-based practices in various states are being taught. And I love that you look at general ed and special ed. We've looked at early intervention, but also some of the related services, so literacy, I was curious if you looked at the speech and language pathology programs or into the school psychology programs to see where at least some of those evidence-based practices might be taught, and especially those that are, well, I think they'd be universal, targeted, and intense. But those are a couple that come to mind. So
That's interesting.
Yeah, I would encourage people to look at Cedar Center for those innovation configurations and then do an inventory, whatever your evidence-based practices are, look at your universities to see who's teaching it and where. So we started with just a survey, kind of an inventory, and haven't gotten to the actual, like, did they actually learn it? Or how do you know if it's a test of knowledge? But first of all, is anybody even teaching it? So I love the discussion. Thanks for, let us know if you look around to those other programs, if you find any of the partner programs might be teaching some of your practices too.
That's a great idea. I'm in a school psychology department, and honestly, we're on separate islands with the Graduate School of Ed, and trying to integrate those, those understandings across different coursework. That I'm in some of the APA NASP requirements that we have kind of prevent some of our students from cross-fertilizing with other departments and other schools on campus. But I think it would be good to have a strategic discussion around that. It's really important.
Yeah, I mean, you could have a faculty summit where you talk about it. You could do, to get started, you could do a special seminar and invite people from different programs to come. If you can't get people to take each other's courses, which I know is a challenge, do some of the extras. And Jennifer can correct me if I'm wrong, but SPDIG money can support some of that because it's around personnel prep and also just professional development. So you could invite field supervisors, you could invite faculty and scholars from other programs.
Yep, absolutely. So you can use up to 10% of your funds for activities like that, and potentially more. You'd have to talk with your project officer about that. But I mean, the big idea is that you're thinking of the whole ecosystem of your state and making sure that educators have the tools they need so that kids get the instruction and supports they need. So this is a little plug for the MTSS community of practice that's going to meet next week. Is we're going to be talking about this topic, universities and integrating MTSS and assessing it. So all right, so Lou, back to you. So the first question we had, and we'll see how many other questions we get to, but we always have future webinars. How did you plan for sustainability from the beginning for your NJTSSR initiative?
So I think the presentation in our design, we were really intentional about, so this was our first year. We also had a no-cost extension year from our first grant that we rewarded in 2016. So this first year in the 2021 grant, we worked with our districts to also refine materials, develop materials, really memorialize our process that we put in place, thinking about how are they going to sustain the work once they exit their consultative relationship with us. And that really helped inform how are we supporting the districts. But the other thing we did is we also said, how do we change our model for coaching so that we are empowering districts to own that. And I do have a visual just kind of juxtaposing what we did for coaching 1.0, coaching 2.0, that shows
Awesome.
that clearly differentiates the two.
Yep.
And then I'll talk that through and then I'll stop sharing because I love seeing everybody's faces. So give me 1 sec.
Okay, great.
Maybe not, maybe it doesn't want to cooperate anymore. Okay, here we go. All right, so this is just a visual for everyone so that understand what I'm talking about. So on here, you see that in the coaching 1.0, we have some unique pieces, right? We opened up with discussing how sustainability and scalability is incorporated into tools and materials, but the approach we took to our coaching has also changed. So during our first BDIG, right, we followed a more traditional cohort model for supporting project districts where our coaches were assigned to individual districts or they had sets of districts, and those coaches managed and coordinated how schools implemented the action plans. And there are many reasons why that became a feature in our first project, but some of those contributing factors is just that at the time we sought to empower our local teams to own their implementation progress, but we didn't have the tools memorialized in one place like we do now to refer teams to where they can continue to independently engage in knowledge or skill building to advance to that next step in this process. And so at times this led districts to having an over-reliance on the coaches to provide training and TA to support them through the process in a more intensive way. So similarly, the onus of the project's implementation also fell on those local coaches, and those individuals were our primary points of contact for our state level coaches. Now, in thinking about that, right, so you have a really symbiotic relationship built with the coach that is external to your team, and we're prioritizing capacity building. And so that over-reliance at times, right, ultimately we weren't getting as much knowledge building as we wanted to get. So in the most recent approach we've taken is the state level coaches are not being assigned to particular schools and districts, but they work as a unified team, and they're working with a team that I described before with the roles and the functions at the school level to distribute those functions more strategically and more transparently. That has to occur for them to implement the project. So we are allocating a lot of time to our web tools because that reinforces our notion of sustainability, where coaching sessions point implementation team members to resources and tools that assist them in navigating those needs, and the contents remain available on our website, whether we're working directly with them or not. And these are available to our district statewide as well. So we are also prioritizing knowledge building. So Todd mentioned that on our modules, we're able to assess how well they're learning the content. And that's important for us because we know that if we achieve knowledge building, then we're creating capacity. So the learning modules available on the website instill readiness for those involved in their respective roles in the project. So that ties in again with our focus on sustainability, because we ultimately want our project participants to learn what they need to so that they can continue the project when we're no longer able to support them. So, but one item that we are still thinking through is how do you maintain engagement from our project schools? So right now, this is new to them. So there's a lot of engagement, a lot of interest. But once the newness of that project begins to wane and there's those competing priorities emerge that Tom was kind of referring to, or just even cultural challenges, I would love to hear some feedback from you all, and how do you navigate that? How do you keep that energy in the project?
I think it's a great question. And I know, some of you have heard me talk about it before. Rob Horner talked about the need, if you're thinking about implementation stages, that beyond full implementation, you needed a regeneration stage And then Michael Fullen talks about the implementation dip. We know it's
Yeah.
real. So how do you continue excitement or get people re-excited? And so if you want to use the Menti, you can go to menti.com and then use the code 39987120. I must have you done it before. Thank you. Perfect. And Kelsey gave us a link directly to in the chat. So an initiative is no longer new. How do you re-energize the effort? Or how do you plan to? Some of you haven't been doing this for long enough that you've gotten there, but what's your plan for it?
Mm-hmm.
Tell stories, disseminate stories. Network with leaders.
And go back to, staff turnover keeps the new data.
Silver lining.
Yes.
Good. Yeah, I think there's something to that center comment so far is saying, this is going to happen to you when you're working with the districts and schools. This is going to happen. It's not if, it's when. And so how are you going to be prepared for that? We just lost the Menti. Lou, were you sharing it?
No, I wasn't.
That was Kelsey.
Sorry, here, let me try that again.
Thank you.
Can you see it now?
Mhm.
Great.
Connect
Okay.
school to another. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Good. Thanks everyone for sharing on that. Current priorities. Sharing results and stories. Recognizing the works of teams and individuals. Thank you for bringing the celebration back into it, right, from our program area meeting. Keeping it fresh by a feedback loop where you look what is and isn't working, attending to issues and highlighting what works. Great. Data portal to support independent data collection and analysis. This is data ability planning around data and ongoing professional learning. Yes, staff turnover. Access to tools and materials. That's right. Looking at what could be a roadblock in that system and figuring out how to remove that. Recognition of incremental progress. Excellent. Monthly emails. Great. So Lou, we've got 1 minute left. What is one big idea that you would want people to take away from what you've learned so far?
What I've learned so far is to prioritize alignment, start at the grassroots, which I know that would be another thing that I would talk a little bit more about today. But the initial project, we focused on division leadership. And when it was turned over to our office, we prioritized office leadership. So that has been much more promising than taking a division leadership role and focusing on getting content out to the school districts that we're serving, and focusing on where those touch points exist. That would be the part that I would say was one of the biggest things I've learned since I've been involved since 2020.
Yeah. And Todd, how about you?
Okay. I think a big takeaway for us is really, again, keeping an eye on building local capacity that has concrete kind of documentation and guidance that's spelled out. Because there's so much that goes on in terms of transitions among leaders and staff that occur, that without something that memorializes that, it's difficult to maintain that sustainability. And so that's something we're trying to be deliberate about, but creating things that allow the local schools and districts to memorialize their process and their structures so they can continue them over time.
Mhm.
Great. Well, thank you so much for both being on, sharing the website. Could you put the web link? I don't know if you all provided that in the chat. I know it's not live
Not-
quite yet.
Not yet.
Uh,
I could
okay.
definitely, we could come back to it next week, Todd, right? That's what we said
Okay.
at the end of
Okay.
next week.
Next week, it'll be up.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you
All
go there
right,
now,
so-
you'll see another website that's not what we want to share. So
Right.
um,
Well, why don't we plan on this? Why don't we put it in the October newsletter?
that
That would
sounds
be
good.
awesome.
All right. Well, it was great talking with you all. And I want to bring to the stage Karen Erickson and Claire Greer from UNC Chapel Hill. I made the big mistake of saying UNC Charlotte earlier, which would be the equivalent of saying Ohio or Oregon State University or University of Oregon. I know it's a difference. Hi, Karen. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you.
Good. Oh, So
It
I'm gonna
is
have-
going to just be me today, not Claire. Is
Oh,
not able
okay.
to join us, so.
good to know. Good to know.
Yeah.
All right. So Karen, I'm going to have you introduce yourself using the 4 H's, and I will go ahead and step off the floor and give you.
I
Turn over to
will,
you.
and I will tell you, so my background is I was a teacher of students with significant disabilities in a public separate school in upstate New York, and was a very early adopter of assistive technology and augmentative and alternative communication, and went back to get my PhD at the Center for Literacy and Disability Studies here at UNC Chapel Hill, because they were doing really cool stuff with technology, and I was interested in that. And it didn't take me long after I started taking coursework to recognize that literacy provides a context for teaching language and communication to students with significant disabilities that I would argue is unlike any other context. So since the early 90s, my colleagues and I here at in North Carolina have been engaged in a wide variety of research and development focused on teaching students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, in particular, reading and writing and communication. My hero changes on a regular basis. My most recent hero is the mother of a 10-year-old who has multiple disabilities, pretty significant health concerns, uses augmentative and alternative communication to communicate and interact with the world. And the work that she has done to help this young boy be an incredible communicator, and to love words and love language, and work through some challenges that most of us can't imagine in order to have this young man find so much joy in learning. So as a teacher, seeing this mom devote her entire, she homeschools him, seeing her devote her entire life to figuring out how to maximize his ability to communicate and interact and independently and interactively be able to learn about the world. She's my most recent hero. My heartbreak is that I continue to have this conversation that I started having 30 years ago. I wish that I could look forward to no longer needing to be banging the drum to get people to remember that we have some students out there who need us to think creatively about how to make sure they get access to the kind of systematic and comprehensive instruction that we know students need in order to learn how to read and write. And the fact that I continue to have conversations with people who question why I think it's important to teach everyone to read and write is heartbreaking to me. But it also becomes fuel that keeps me going. And my hope is that projects like Tar Heel Shared Reader and the other work that we've been doing provides educators with a vision of what's possible and provides them with tools that allow all, and I mean all, students to be able to have an opportunity to maximize their ability to, most of the students I work with, independence isn't the goal, it's control over their interdependence. And having control over who the people are that are going to interact with you throughout the rest of your life requires you to have communication and literacy skills. Without those things, you will never have that control. And so that's my hope.
Yeah.
And
Karen, I just wanted to say one
yeah.
thing real quick, is today I like to listen to the recordings from the Leadership Project Directors Conference, OSOPS conference. And today I was listening to one from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, their OCA, and they were saying that they picked up your book, one of your
Mhm.
books, and that inspired them to change the whole system in North Carolina.
Mhm.
And I just think, it's like, you don't know, right? Like you put out you touch a million people, you do all these books and articles and presentations. And then one day that book that you never thought was going to, changes the whole system.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Yeah.
your hope is coming true for state of North Carolina at the very least.
Yeah. Sometimes it's hardest in your own backyard, right?
Mm.
So, yeah. So I am here today to talk about our project called Tar Heel Shared Reader. We are in the final stages of our no-cost extension, and we are wrapping up. This is a Stepping Up Technology Implementation Grant. It is based on a set of beliefs that we carry with us to all of our projects here at the Center for Literacy and Disability Studies. We believe that literacy and communication are basic human rights. The idea that people have made this sort of false dichotomy between functional and academic makes no sense. Literacy and communication are human rights. This isn't about an either or. In order to achieve that human right, all students have the basic right to instruction that's going to help them learn literacy and versatile communication skills. And that word versatile is really important. We have a lot of techniques that we're using to train students to use communication in really narrowly defined ways that they then aren't able to apply in versatile ways across different contexts. And so really working to think about instruction that is comprehensive and systematic and leads to literacy and versatile communication skills. We also believe that teachers can acquire the knowledge, skills, and dispositions needed to teach literacy and communication without scripted programs. Years ago, in the late 90s, we did some work where we actually allowed fidelity to vary. We were interested in seeing what the impact of different levels of fidelity was on the outcomes in a study that was one of our earliest studies looking at comprehensive emergent literacy instruction for students with significant disabilities. And we ended up with 3 groups of teachers. 2 of the groups of teachers had fairly low fidelity. The 3rd group had good fidelity. No big surprise, the group with solid fidelity, it was around 85–90% for this group. Their students made positive gains in their reading, writing, and communication skills, and their gains were right around the mean. If you think about a bell curve, they all sort of fell around the center. There was a group of teachers who had low fidelity skills, and they were the teachers that we all work really hard to be more effective in our coaching and professional development. And the biggest challenge with them is they weren't doing anything. So their fidelity was very low because they were just skipping huge portions of what they had been asked to do. And then there was the 3rd group, and they were the magic group, and they taught us so much about what we needed to do moving forward. Because that 3rd group had very low fidelity, but they had low fidelity because they were smarter than we were. They were working with one teacher in particular. She was a high school teacher. This work was around an emergent literacy program called Meville to Weeville. And there was an activity that we had in there called kids would make a me box, and they would have to communicate with other people about what their favorite things were, and they'd have to gather these things, and then they would, in a shared writing context, write about those things, and then share their Me boxes with each other. And this teacher looked at this activity and said, I'm not having my high school kids make Me boxes. And so she took it and she turned it into a time capsule. And she had her high school age students who all had the most complex multiple disabilities, who were all beginning communicators, who didn't know the difference between letters and numbers and other kinds of symbols yet. And she had them make time capsules, knowing that she was going to come back to this time capsule idea with some of her students were going to be with her for 4 years, and that she could, in really appropriate ways, come back to it year after year, and that time capsules were far more appropriate for her high school kids than the Me boxes that we had come up with. So her fidelity was low, but her fidelity was low because she filled that extra stuff that we didn't. She did all kinds of other things that were better than what we had planned. And from that, we have really moved forward, continuing to think about how do we provide that basic foundational professional development, coaching supports, resources, and materials without so narrowly scripting it that we keep the teachers who are working with this group of very complex kids from being able to think in flexible and versatile ways about how they're going to help their students learn with the level of repetition and variety that their students need, and then also be promoting our second belief here about learning literacy and versatile communication skills. So that these are all really core underlying the work that we've done in Tar Heel Shared Reader. In our project, we are targeting students who have various levels and means of communication. In our work, we are always recruiting, in this project in particular, we were specifically seeking students who participate in the alternate assessment and who may or may not use speech, sign, or augmentative and alternative communication to interact with the world around them. We were looking for students who were not reading with comprehension above at a second grade level or higher, so above a first grade level. We know from alternate assessment data as part of the Dynamic Learning Maps Consortium that I'm part of, that we're talking about better than 80% of all of the kids who participate in alternate assessment based on alternate achievement standards. We were interested in targeting students who may or may not be interested in reading at all. A big part of what we've done is applying notions of universal design for learning, specifically with attention to the ways that we recruit students' attention and sustain their attention over time. So how do we help students who have zero interest at all in any of the reading and writing we're asking them to do? How do we help them become interested? We are targeting students who read only because other people make them. Many students with significant disabilities work their way through the day doing short tasks in exchange for things that they're going to get to do instead. So lots of do this so that you then can do this other preferred activity. And we were seeking those students so that we could be building a model that would help that group of students begin to enjoy reading and participating in shared reading for the sake of being a participant in shared reading, not because it was going to earn them something else. And we're also looking for students who are pretty passive. So we have a lot of particularly older students who will sort of sit and do nothing because they're not, I would argue, they're not sure what they're supposed to be doing. So they're pretty passive. The point in this checklist is to let you know is we were recruiting all of those students with the most significant cognitive disabilities who are not yet reading with comprehension above a first grade level. And we're talking about all of those students who are still basic foundational, don't know letters, don't know numbers, don't know anything about how print is organized, don't understand that print carries meaning, are early language and communication learners. And so we can't take for granted that they're bringing with them to school the kinds of language, cognitive experiences and understandings that students without significant cognitive disabilities bring to school every day. So I would like to start with a quick poll and just find out how many of you in your projects are systematically addressing the needs of students who have significant support needs or students with significant cognitive disabilities. And I think we have a poll.
Okay, so we got another Mentimeter. Kelsey put the link that gets you directly there into the chat, or you can use menti.com on your phone and use code 399872120. How does your project specifically address the needs of students with significant support needs? And it's okay to say, we don't at this time, we hope to do it in the future, we hope, etc. But I hope you did see, Karen, I know sometimes when you're presenting, you can't see the chat, that that you've already inspired people in the audience
Thanks.
to take on this work, right? And there are chances, as people are thinking about it, there are chances in this iteration of your grant to add new activities. You work with your project officer, you can do that. There are also opportunities in future grant applications to add activities like this. Great, I see some responses. And Karen, do you want to call out some of the answers, or do you want me to do so?
Yeah, so making sure that there's some specific observation and coaching around direct instruction programs. Not addressing it at this time, but recently had a reach out from a state school for the deaf and blind. And I have a connection that I'll be making to that in a minute. Thinking about advanced tiers of professional learning, multidisciplinary teams, ensuring access to intervention that's appropriately matched to the needs and is effective. If they are parents of Native kids with significant, we're supporting our parent center and building. Yeah, lots of really good connections with parent centers and state deaf-blind projects. I really would like to encourage you to reach out to both of them as other state projects that have a really specific interest in this group of students and a long history of support, family engagement and leadership. But you actually have a program, Families to the Max. That's awesome.
Yeah, Pennsylvania. I have to say, I'm seeing a strand or a theme of family engagement and how important families are to our work today, from our 4-H stories to getting practices into action. How important they are.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. As informative as we keep moving forward here. So in Tar Heel Shared Reader, we're specifically focusing on these students with significant support needs, significant cognitive disabilities, who participate in alternate assessment based on alternate achievement needs. So it's the subgroup of students, it's about 80% of the kids who participate in the alternate assessment, and it's the bottom 80%, which is not typical. Most people are always talking about the top. Our project took this evidence-based practice called shared reading, which is absolutely, almost all of the research has been situated in work with preschool age children. Shared reading has been for years sort of heralded as the single most important activity for developing the knowledge for eventual success in reading, a key context for language and literacy intervention for children with and without disabilities. And it is, in 2015, it was reviewed by the What Works Clearinghouse. And before that, it was central to the National Early Literacy Panel, which many of you would know followed the National Reading Panel report, but had a focus on this early emergent literacy and the kinds of instruction that we need to be providing in order to ensure that students can be successful with the kind of systematic reading instruction that you all have been talking about in your MTSS and your science of reading based programs. One of the things that I've been trying to make sure people are hearing is the work we do is absolutely grounded in the science of reading, but the kids we're working with were absolutely excluded from all of the research that is the basis of the science of reading. And the work that, so some of the interventions we do look a little different because we're trying to find ways that the inside of the head process that the students we're working with are doing is consistent with what it is we know needs to be happening inside of the head based on the science of reading. But most of the students we work with, if they can speak, their articulation isn't clear enough for a teacher to be able to know if they've correctly articulated a phoneme or not. And so we've had to figure out ways to provide phonemic awareness and phonics instruction that require the students to think the phonemes and to learn the phonemes, but we can't depend on being able to listen to them produce them because of their complex communication needs. So you'll see us often and throughout the Tar Heel Shared Reader resources and supports draw upon the research that is the research with students children without disabilities or children with identified high incidence disabilities, and then figure out how can we apply that as we're trying to create models and supports that work with students who can't respond and interact in the same way that other children might. And so shared reading is this evidence-based practice. I'm putting it in the context of the fact that we recognize that it is, most of that research has been conducted with preschool age children, but I'm interested in knowing if your project includes shared reading as an evidence-based practice or not. I'm going to bet that if we had everybody responding, we would end up with seeing this same proportion over time. We'll give it another minute.
Yeah. And hopefully
Karen,
once
I was torn to say yes or no, because I think there's a nuance in that has to do with the purpose of the shared reading.
Uh-huh.
And so, I mean, the shared reading to develop oral language, foster vocabulary development. I mean, I see that as definitely aligned with the science of reading.
Mhm.
But if, you know what I mean? So there were just a
Yeah.
couple of nuances.
Yeah, and I would say, I think that was Kim who was talking. I would say
Yeah.
that we use shared reading for that same purpose, and use it as a way that we're supporting students in developing their expressive communication skills, and absolutely working on it to build their vocabulary and their oral language knowledge and their understanding of print and how print works. So. All right, so at least some of your projects have some emphasis on shared reading, and it's possible that the work that we've done in Tar Heel Shared Reader might provide an opportunity for you to offer it to the special education and or inclusive classrooms that include students with significant disabilities. All right. So we see shared reading as this super rich context to support communication and interaction, to build that oral language knowledge that we know is so foundational. When we're doing shared reading, our goal is to maximize student interaction and engagement. We're focusing on commenting and connecting as a starting place. So most people, when they think about shared reading, go directly to Whitehurst and dialogic reading, and we go there, but we have to help our students develop engagement and interaction and the ability to comment and connect in order for them to be successful in a dialogic reading based intervention. So that is a phase of the work that we're doing. Ultimately, we want students to take the lead in interactions. We want them to develop the kind of sophisticated communication systems that this boy has, so that he can ask us questions, so that he can connect, so that we can have the kind of rich dialogic interactions that we know make shared reading most successful for students. We teach adults through a series of professional development how to guide, encourage, and support communication during shared reading. And then the evidence tells us that when we do this, we build joint attention, understanding of concepts of print, alphabet knowledge, phonological awareness, knowledge in vocabulary and other language domains, and then very important for this group of students, expressive communication skills. So these are all things that students with significant support needs or significant cognitive disabilities really struggle to do. And so Tar Heel Shared Reader helps us address all of that. It has two components. There is the sharedreader.org site, which is the implementation and professional development site. And then there's a shared reading interface that is a digital interface that is supports teachers in delivering shared reading while it's providing on-screen communication supports for the 30% of students with significant cognitive disabilities out there who don't have communication systems yet. On the Shared Reader site, what you'll find are 5 professional development modules. All of our modules are available in a self-directed. These are all open source available. A self-directed format that are video-based, and they include the kind of assessments of knowledge that you've been talking about in your work. And they're also packaged for facilitated delivery so that a coach or a trainer could deliver the module to a small group. In Tar Heel Shared Reader, those modules are spread out over time, because in between each module, teachers are provided with instructional planning and self-reflection forms. And then there's a whole series of coaching supports that allow teachers to get the first step going and do it with some level of fidelity before they then move to the next level. It's also the case that we teach teachers how to make some database decisions, so that they're paying attention to what their students are doing during shared reading before they move up to the next level of complexity. Specifically, as they're doing this activity called Follow the Car, they are waiting for students to initiate without prompting meaningful comments during shared reading before they then would move to put the crowd in the car, which is the dialogic reading step. Each one of the modules is about 45 to 60 minutes in its facilitated format. You'll
Karen,
see,
just real quick question. Is this for families as well? Or
we have
just
had
teachers?
tons of families completing it, particularly because all of these modules were live during the pandemic, when these were the kids whose families had no idea how to support them in virtual learning. And so all of our projects, we had huge usage by parents during the pandemic, and lots of amazing unsolicited feedback from parents about the ways that they were able to use it. It was very exciting.
Great. And we're just about at time, just to give you a heads.
So the coaching supports are all cyclical. Based on my overhearing your conversation, I think you'd find them to be very consistent with the kinds of work that you're doing. The Shared Reader, shared at tarheel.reader.com, just to give you a screenshot. Very simple beginning to read books that teachers and others have written. It's all crowdsourced. We have about 70,000 books on the site now. So you can imagine some are not very good, but others are very appealing. And then on the screen, you have the option of displaying communication supports for students who need that one place to look to get attention to what's happening. And up in the left-hand corner of the screen is a place where we have some teacher supports, where teachers are planning ahead of time what they're going to say as a comment. And that shows up on the screen so that they have one less thing to juggle and not having a lesson plan book in front of them while they're trying to keep the attention of this child and read the book together. So there's these two components. There's the whole professional development and implementation supports, and then there's the shared reading interface. The sharedreader.org and all of that professional development will work with any book or any text that people want to read. The shared reading interface is the way that we've made sure that everybody has access to a book. And so we don't have teachers who are saying, I just got a new classroom, I have nothing. Well, now you have something. So we would love for you to think about ways that you can disseminate information about Tar Heel Shared Reader to the teams that you're working with, and to get people to think about the value of shared reading for those students who aren't demonstrating some of the really basic emergent understandings of language and literacy that are required for them to then be successful with the more conventional literacy that's the focus of most of what we do in the work that we do every day. So I thank you. Here's some contact information. I'm really happy to help people problem solve and follow up if you have more questions.
And Karen, how much does it cost, Tar Heel
It's
Reader?
free, all of it.
Free. What do you know? What do you
Yeah.
know? So people could do this right away.
They could do it
leave the
right away.
team,
Yes.
They could integrate this into their MTSS or other work. What do you know?
Yep. And
Well,
many
Karen-
of your public separate schools, most states have a few still, they're using this as their systematic professional development across the year and finding really nice outcomes as a result of it. And so it's packaged in a way that you need some people to make a commitment to do it, and then you can run with it.
I think you lit a fire under us. I appreciate that fire and the passion that you bring to the work. I appreciate that it never ebbs and it's making an impact. It takes a while.
Thanks.
It's a
Yeah.
slow moving glacier some days, but
Yeah.
we appreciate you and thanks for coming and visiting
you
with
for
us.
having
And
us.
hopefully we'll be able to do this again in the future. Thank you, Lou and Todd. Thank you, Tom. And thank you, Kelsey, for putting it all together. What a great day. Everyone have a good afternoon and look for the next October newsletter to get some materials from today and the website address for New Jersey.